Hello students, welcome to the e-learning program initiated by Sri Gyananjali Vidyapeeth for the students of Standard 8. Nice to see you once again in today's social science lecture for Standard 8. In today's lecture, we are about to start a new chapter in social science, a chapter related to history. In the earlier lectures, in the past 10 lectures, we have studied one chapter of each branch of social studies, that is history, geography and civics. So once again today we are going to start a new chapter in history. You can very well see the name being displayed on the board, and the title says How the Traders Became Rulers. Yes, a very significant question, a very significant thing to think about, isn't it? When the foreign powers came to our country, they had come with only one intention, that is to trade with us. And this is what we learnt in chapter 1 also, isn't it? The arrival of the Europeans. Trade with India or foreign countries trading with India through the land route was prevalent. Foreign powers like the Dutch, the Portuguese, the French, the British, isn't it? They used to trade with India, but through the land route, and they had to come via Afghanistan and the other places, Turkey. But due to multiple taxation problems, there was a need arise that the land route was stopped. There was a need arise, and with the span of time, in the 15th century, it was Vasco da Gama who found the sea route to India, and that is how we further developed the trade with the foreign countries. We learnt with the help of the map that how he circumnavigated the Cape of Good Hope and reached Calicut, and then Zamorin gave permission to rule, and that is how the Portuguese started ruling in or trading in India with us. Well, we also understood in the last chapter that in the 16th century, 1600, the merchants or the traders in England formed an East India Company, a company called East India Company, for the purpose of trading. So it was only for the purpose of trading. We very well learned this, isn't it? We need to recall these things because this is a chapter connected to what we have learned earlier. So in the 1600s, or we can say in the 17th century, it was the British who made the East India Company, and they visited India. The first time when they came to India, the first ship that came to India, that is in the year 1600, isn't it? 1608. The first time when W. Hawkins came, the captain of the ship who came, he landed over here in Surat. He was denied, isn't it? They were not able to get permission from Jahangir to trade. Later on, it was Thomas Roe who arrived in India and acquired permission to establish trading center in Surat, and later on Delhi went into the hands of Shah Jahan. So we have just acquired all this understanding from the last history chapter, that is chapter number 1. How did the Europeans come to our country and they started trading? But it was all about trading. Gradually in the chapter we learnt that the traders had intentions of developing their colonies, so colonization established in our country. And we also witnessed in the first chapter that it was the fight that took place between Siraj-ud-Dawla, the turning point in the history of India, that is the Battle of Plassey, followed by Battle of Buxar. Well, so in this chapter we are going to deal basically about how the traders became rulers. How did the people of British particularly went from trade to territory? If I just summarize or say this in short, traders became rulers from trade to territory. How did they go from trade to territory? We very well know that initially they had come with the intention of only trading business, where they only wanted to flourish their business and earn some quick profit, isn't it? And because of that, they had come to our country. The British initially came to India in search of good markets. They wanted to acquire the raw products from us, finish the products in their country, and then come and sell it in our country, the finished goods. And that is what used to happen. Why did they do this? In order to acquire or to gain a lot of profit. They wanted to increase their profit. The race was going on. Not only British, but the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese, all sailed in the same boat. They all wanted to earn good profit, because India at that time had lots and lots of resources, isn't it? It was a resourceful country. Condiments, spices, muslin, cloth, silk, everything was in great demand in the foreign countries, and therefore all this was available in our country. But the Britishers had got an upper hand, because they were good at navy, isn't it? They were good at the sea. So because of their naval superiority, British had an upper hand. There was a lot of rivalry between these different powers, these foreign powers. During the time of British, before them came the Portuguese, and after the Portuguese came the British. But the British had a great rivalry with the French, particularly in particular. So they often had wars. When things could not be solved with mutual understanding or something, there were wars. They had conflicts with them. So conflicts is kind of small, kind of quarrelsome thing. But these quarrels which the British had with the French and the other foreign powers gradually went into having quarrels with the Indian rulers also. They had small quarrels, small fight with Indian rulers, local rulers like Marathas, Nizams, the Tipu Sultan, the Mughals, and this is how gradually what happened. These little fights, these little quarrels, these wars turned out to be a state of or a position of acquiring territory. Therefore, I said from trade to territory. They had wars with them, and in the war, when they lost their kingdom, these kingdoms came into the hands of the British power. Well, slowly but surely, the British weakened the entire Indian kingdoms. They were playing with them. They manipulated their minds. They cheated them in a number of ways. And this is what we're going to understand in this particular chapter today, how the traders became the rulers. Gradually, the military and scientific superiority, what they possessed, helped them to acquire their political hold on the country of India. So in this particular chapter, we are going to cover these two important things. As you can see, I have mentioned on the board, Wellesley's policy of expansion and the subsidiary alliance policy. These two things we are going to cover in today's lecture. There is the third thing, that is about the annexation policy. In the upcoming lecture, we will be looking to that as well. So these are the two things we are going to cover in today's lecture. Have a look at the material given to you on page number 34. The chapter begins. The introduction part is quite interesting. So let's read the introduction part first and try to understand what is being told to us. The children were engrossed in reading the story of two cats and monkey during the recess. So here is the beginning of our chapter, which introduces the chapter to us, where children are reading a story about the two cats and a monkey, and I am very sure that you must be knowing the story about these two cats and monkey, definitely. Well, still I will just, as a part of recapitulation, tell you the story in very short. One day, a monkey who was up on the tree was observing two cats who were in search of food, and luckily they found a piece of bread, a loaf of bread. But they only happened to glance their eyes on this loaf of bread. It was lying somewhere. So the two cats, who were good friends, when they reached there, the first cat said, I saw it first, so it is mine. And the second cat said, no, I saw it first, therefore it is mine. So a little petty quarrel started between the two cats. Now all this was being observed by the monkey, enjoying his merry time in the tree over there. But he also saw that it's a good time. The two cats are literally fighting for the piece of bread, a loaf of bread. So why not take advantage of this? Why not bless ourselves? So the monkey was very clever. And the two cats, when they were quarreling, the monkey arrived over here. And naturally, he used his diplomatic ideas, his divide and rule kind of thing. So he wanted to put some kind of quarrel between the two people, the two cats. So when the two cats were demanding that the piece of loaf belongs to each one of them, he said, why are you people quarreling? Why are you cats quarreling? And they revealed the whole thing to them. To this, the monkey said, don't worry, I have got two hands with me. I will divide the loaf of bread into two parts and give it to you. The matter is solved. So the cats were very, very happy. Let's see, our problem is solved. But the monkey was very sharp, very clever. What did he do? He deliberately divided the loaf of bread in such a manner that one piece remained small and the other piece remained larger or a little bigger. Now when this happened, what happens? The cats were observing, and naturally none of the cats would be ready to take the smaller one. So probably he must have offered, this is for you and this was, so they must have said that this is the smaller one and this is the larger one. Why should I take the smaller one? Give it to the other one. And the other one said, why should I take it? Give it to the other one. So this is how he tried to put this in the minds of the cat, that one is small and one is big. So naturally the monkey again said, don't worry, I have a solution for that as well. Saying this, he took a bite from the larger piece that he had, probably in his right hand or so. But this time when he bit the larger piece, what happened? He bit it in such a manner that the piece that was smaller initially now became large, and the piece of bread, the part of that loaf which was originally large, became small this time. So once again, that when he offered this to the two cats, the same problem would be said. They would have said that now this has become larger, this is small, so why should I take this? I want the initially smaller one. And this is how the thing gradually goes on, and eventually what happens, one by one he keeps on biting from both the pieces, and at the end, when the cat actually realized, when the monkey climbed back on the tree, that they had got nothing and he had befooled them. And this is what happened. He befooled the two cats and none of the cats got anything. So what happens? When two people quarrel, two friends quarrel, or when there is a quarrel between people, those who are known to each other in a family or in a country also, similarly in kingdoms also, what happens? A third person, outsider, comes and takes due benefit of it. And who is at loss? The people who are quarreling. Well, so this was the story that the two children were reading. Well, we understood the story, we recalled the story. Jai and Mitali. So the names also have been given of these two kids. Jai and Mitali were making fun of each other. So they were making fun of each other when they read. To this, their class teacher who was sitting beside them. So the class teacher was sitting beside them at recess time. Maybe the teacher was assisting them. Children, this too is a policy. Well, which stories also we learn, just like I tried to teach you. Children, this too is a policy. The third party takes advantage of a quarrel between the two, isn't it? This is what happens in our daily life also. When two friends are fighting and someone who is really not your friend will take due advantage of it, and you will be in disadvantage. So remember this. The teacher said, children, this too is a policy. So he wanted to teach them that you are not just reading a story. The story is giving you a moral message also. Try to understand this. The third party takes advantage of a quarrel between the two. The British had expanded their empire in India with such a policy. You see, this story is related to what we are going to learn today. So simply we are not doing a story now. We are understanding that this story is related to what British did, isn't it? They tried to make two kingdoms quarrel between them, amongst them, the kingdoms that were prevalent in India before the British took control over us. So gradually they brought about their own techniques, their tactics, their diplomatic ways in order to deceive the kingdoms, deceive the rulers of our country, and that is how they acquired their territorial impacts, the territorial rule over our country. Well, the British expanded their empire in India with such a policy. Jay asked, "Sir, how is that possible?" So Jay had a curious question. How is that possible? How could one do this? How could one expand another person's kingdom? Well, to this the class teacher said, let us go to the class, and there I will explain about the British, how the British came to India and established their rule over the Indians. And that is what we are going to understand more in details about these two policies, that is Wellesley's policy of expansion and subsidiary alliance policy, which will be explained to us in this chapter. Well, you can see the map given to you, the British rule. The British casted their eyes on this country, isn't it? You can see the different colored schemes over here. That is in 1798, some regions were captured by the British. You can see in the image in your material. Followed by 1805. Later on, they expanded their empire to a greater extent. All the names have been given to you, which places they conquered, captured with the help of these two particular policies. Description is given to you about that. By the mid of 18th century, so it all started in the 17th century when they set their foot for the first time, and by the mid of the 18th century, when the 18th century came to the middle, okay, so by that time most of the part of India was under the British rule. British had acquired most of the states, most of the regions, most of the territories were captured by the British people. So by the mid of 18th century, the British had started to emerge as a strong power on the Indian political horizon and the map of India. Do you know that British came to India only for trade? Yes, we initially understood about it, isn't it? They came for only the purpose of trade. Initially, they took permission to trade in the Indian states. Then, how did they become the rulers of the entire India? Well, almost entire of the India was under the British dominance. The history of the British rule arouses many such questions in our curious minds, isn't it? Well, to serve their economy interest, they increased their political hold on India with the use of the British diplomatic tactics. So the British people use all diplomatic tactics in order to increase their wealth. They wanted to prosper, they wanted to make their country prosperous, and therefore they used our country, isn't it? So they had this interest to develop the economy of their own country, and therefore they made use of us. And our foolish rulers did not understand the diplomatic tactics that were being played. How did they manipulate the minds of the Indian rulers from time to time? Well, all this is what we are going to discuss with the help of the first policy that we have, the Wellesley's policy of expansion. How did Wellesley expand the British rule, the British Empire in our country over here? He was a very clever person, a diplomat who expanded the British rule, the British Empire in India, and therefore he adopted certain policies, and therefore it is said Wellesley's policy of expansion. Well, we will read about this, but before this, have a look at the image being displayed on your screen. This is the image showing Lord Wellesley as the Governor General who came to India in 1798, at a time when the British were locked in a life and death struggle with France all over the world. Lord Wellesley decided that the time was ripe for bringing as many Indian states as possible under British control. By 1797, the two strongest Indian powers, Mysore and Maratha, had declined in power. The Third Anglo-Mysore War had reduced Mysore to a mere shadow of its recent greatness, and the Marathas were dissipating their strength in mutual intrigues and wars. Political conditions in India were propitious for a policy of British expansion. Aggression was easy as well as profitable. So you see, when Wellesley came to India as a Governor General in 1798, he realized these things because they had frequent conflicts with the British and the other powers. So he thought at that time, if most of the Indian states came into the British hands, then they would be having an upper hand, they would be having great supreme power in our country. Therefore, he thought of something, and what he thought was about the expansion policy. He thought how to expand their political rule and try to have dominance on the country. Well, this is what he did. Let us read from the material that is given to us about the Wellesley's policy of expansion on page 34. When Wellesley came to India as the Governor General in 1798, I already shared the date with you, cutthroat competition existed between England and France. So England and France were having a cutthroat competition. Now what is cutthroat competition? Very sharp competition is called cutthroat. Well, the literal meaning is you get a chance and you deceive or you kill your enemy. So cutthroat competition was going on. Edge to edge competition was going on. It's called cutthroat competition between England and France. So none of the powers wanted to surrender. None of the powers wanted to give up. Both these powers wanted to just fight against each other. They just wanted to excel in any form, in any manner, no matter what took for them to excel. So the British, the England and France, they were having a lot of competition between them, and it was necessary at that time to check France, to stop France from becoming powerful India so as to expand the British rule in India. So what was the thinking of Wellesley at that time? That if we want to excel, if we want to establish our supremacy in India, then we should stop the French from expanding themselves or acquiring more territories in our country, because the more territory you acquire, the more rule you get, the more power you get, isn't it? That was the situation at that time. Therefore, the different rulers, the different kingdoms were being manipulated by the French as well as by the British. Therefore, Wellesley introduced a new plan. Something came to his mind and he introduced a new plan which was known as subsidiary alliance. When alliance means friendship, isn't it? To be friends with each other. So alliance policy was introduced by Wellesley. Wellesley introduced a new plan which was known as the subsidiary alliance. Now, as per the scheme, what is the subsidiary alliance? We should be knowing more about it. As per the scheme, any princely state, any state that was ruled by a king, princely state means a state, a region, a territory, an area ruled by a prince or a king, accepted the alliance, had to keep and maintain the British army as well as keep a British representative in the royal court. Now what did he scare the kingdoms over here? He went to the different kingdom, he went to the Marathas, he went to the Nizam, he went to the Mughals. And what did he tell them? That if you accept our subsidiary alliance policy, we will give you protection against your enemy. That is what he manipulated their minds. So he showed something very, very interesting to them. He brought this to their minds. So it was a kind of tempting cake that he showed them. That if you accept my policy, but the policy came with certain conditions, that is what we are going to read. So as per the scheme, any princely state that accepted the policy, we will read about the policy in a while. As per the scheme, any princely state that accepted the alliance had to keep and maintain what? The British army So the British people's expenses were to be borne by that particular king. Now that is a expensive affair, isn't it? So what did the British people do? They brought more and more men, trained people, their soldiers from England to India. So when these people came to India, their military power expanded. Now naturally, if Britishers are bringing their soldiers to India in order to seek protection for themselves, expand their military power, then they will have to provide them for food, clothing, shelter and other necessary things, isn't it? For which in turn they have to spend a lot of money what they are earning from trade in order to maintain a maintain army, isn't it? So what cleverness Wellesley used, that he made the kings accept his policy, that is the subsidiary alliance policy, and in turn transferred all the expenses that he thought was required to be incurring on their soldiers, on the expenditure of soldiers, on maintaining the soldiers, on the shoulders of the Indian kings. That is how cleverly he kind of gave this, or kind of in a way sold the subsidiary alliance policy to the kings. So whoever accepted, whichever kingdom accepted the subsidiary alliance, was supposed to maintain the British army, all the expenses. And not just that, second thing he said, a British representative will be in the royal court. Now naturally a king has his own court with his courtiers, and a lot of things are discussed in the court, important matters are discussed over there. Now which the Britishers should not be knowing what kind of activities they are doing. It is a secret. But in order to know those things, he kept this point, that a British representative, a British member, an officer of the British people would be as a representative in the court of that king. Well, he told the king that I will give you protection at the time of war. Naturally, that is what the king wanted. When war used to take place, he would be having the British army to fight for him. The only thing is he would have to maintain that, because the Britishers had got the expertise of different weapons, isn't it? Well, they had the modern weapons also with them. Therefore, the British people gave this kind of a tempting cake to them, that we will protect you, and in turn you will only have to maintain our army and keep one of our representatives in the court. Well, this way the British could maintain their army without spending any money. So you see, they did not have to spend any money from their own pockets. The British naturally earned money from the trading activities, but in turn they had to spend this money in order to maintain the army. So now what happened? Double profit they have. They are earning the profit. They are not spending that profit for maintaining the army. So they are also protected, and the money is also not spent. Therefore, they did not have to spend any money. However, the princely states were not allowed to utilize the army at their own will. Now, even after maintaining the army, isn't it? If the Indian king is spending such a lot of money to maintain those army, the king has a right to utilize his services of soldiers, isn't it? But that also was restricted. Despite of giving money to maintain, despite of spending money to maintain those soldiers, maintaining that army, food, clothing, shelter, whatever they had to spend for, their training, for artillery, for weapons and everything, despite of that, the king was not allowed to use the services in times of war. Now this was something very unique, isn't it? So they were not allowed to utilize the army at their own will. Yet they would be given the services, but at the will of the British. On their own will they cannot do it. On their own, they'll have to seek permission. Well, this system which made many feel secure in the beginning. So at the beginning, when this was told to the Indian kings, they thought that it is a very good deal, isn't it? We only have to spend for the maintenance of the army, but we will get so many soldiers at that given point of time. Whenever we have a conflict, whenever we have a war with our neighboring kingdoms, isn't it? Because the neighboring kingdoms had threat. So each king over here had threat from his neighboring kingdom. So what happened? They thought that it was a good deal. So in the beginning, this was very, very attractive, very, very luring. Therefore, they accepted the policy. But gradually they realized that it was like a slow poison that they had taken. So, which made them feel secure in the beginning, but made them feel enslaved and threatened. So they were getting threatened also, that now we are trapped, we are threatened. Subsidiary alliance acted like a slow poison for the princely state. Initially, when they accepted, they did not know that they were getting into a trap. So these kings who accepted the policy later on realized that they have drunk poison. It's a slow poison for the princely state. Well, the Indian states became victims of the subsidiary alliance policy. The Indian states that became the victims of the alliance policy were Hyderabad, Mysore, Ayodhya, Jodhpur, Gaikwads of Vadodara, Peshwas of Pune, and the Sindhyas of Gwalior. So all these states, all these rulers became the victim of this slow poison that they had accepted, that is the subsidiary alliance policy. Well, let us talk about in details a bit about what exactly the subsidiary alliance policy had to offer with the help of this image being shown to you on your screen. The image tells us, explains us the key points on subsidiary alliance framed by Lord Wellesley, the Governor General of India from 1798 to 1805. So the tenure is given to you from which year up to which year did Governor General Lord Wellesley rule in India, or till what time he was a Governor General. The subsidiary alliance was a major process that led to the building of the British Empire in India. So you see, this was the most important thing that took place in the history of India for the building of the British Empire in India. Well, the British East India Company started an outright war of non-intervention policy and the assumptions of the territories of the previously subordinated rulers to achieve political aspiration, that is, bringing the Indian states within the orbit of the British power. The British subsidiary alliance system was non-intervention policy used by Lord Wellesley, who was the Governor General from 1798 to 1805, to establish the British Empire in India. So the basic intention was to develop or to increase the British control over India, and therefore this system was introduced. Well, according to this system, every ruler in India had to accept to pay a subsidy to the British for the maintenance of British army. In return, the British would protect them from their enemies, which gave the British enormous expansion. The terms subsidiary alliance was introduced by French Governor Dupleix was firstly used by Lord Wellesley, who effectively institutionalized the policy of non-intervention, which made the Nawab and the Nizam's subsidiary allies by signing almost 100 such treaties. Well, here are some key points of the subsidiary alliance. The allies of the Indian states, rulers were compelled, they were forced to accept the permanent garrison, that is the bonding or the bond, we can say garrison, of the British army within their territories and to pay a subsidy for its maintenance. The Indian rulers could not employ any European in their service. See, this was the second thing. So they were not allowed to appoint any European soldier or a European employee in their kingdom also. So if you are accepting this, you cannot take the help of any other soldier or any other foreign countries, this thing. So say the British kingdom, for example, the Nizam of Hyderabad, if he accepts the subsidiary alliance policy, he will not be allowed to keep any French or any Dutch or any Portuguese officer in his army or in his kingdom. They could not negotiate with any other Indian rulers without consulting the Governor General. Now you can see the strict rule that if a king wants to negotiate terms and conditions with a neighboring countries or someone whom he has got conflict with or problem with, so he was not allowed to do that as well. So no negotiation was allowed by the Indian rulers without consulting governor. For that also they need to take permission from the Governor General. Now see how wrong this is, isn't it? In a way they were being cheated. A British resident was also stationed in the Indian court. So in the court of the king there would be a representative, a British representative. That is what we read earlier. Well, state comes under the periphery of the policy. The Nizam of Hyderabad was the first victim of this policy. In AD 1798, it detached the Nizam from the French and also forbade having alliances with the Maratha without British consent. So without British permission, they were not allowed to have any kind of relationship. Second state was Mysore in 1799. Then Wellesley compelled the Nawab of Awadh to accept the policy of subsidiary alliance in the year 1801 AD. Followed by the Peshwa Bajirao in 1802. Peshwa Bajirao too also subjugated his state under this policy. Many Maratha states like Bhosle and Sindhyas in 1803 also accepted the terms of policy. The last Maratha confederation, Holkars, too accepted the terms of the subsidiary alliance. The policy of subsidiary alliance was in reality a document of losing sovereignty, independence, which meant that the state did not have any rights to self-defense, of maintaining diplomatic relations, of employing foreign experts, and of settling its disputes with its neighbors. So you see, all sorts of unfair means were given in the document, told to us in the document. So all these unfair means and diplomatic tactics were used by Wellesley to expand the British rule. Somehow they got control over the country. So subsidiary alliance policy was slow poison, and by the time they realized this thing, it was too late for them. Well, let us further read from the text about the next thing that given to what? Nizams of Hyderabad was the first victim of the Wellesley subsidiary alliance. Then it was Mysore and Awadh. Tanjore and Karnataka met with the same fate. So same was the situation with these states as well. The British made the Marathas fight amongst themselves. So they created conflicts between the Maratha rulers themselves. And therefore what happened? They were compelled to accept the subsidiary alliance. So somehow the British made a situation arising in the country that they had to accept the subsidiary alliance, hook or by crook, and consequently made them accept the subsidiary alliance owing to the losses incurred by Nizam in his fight with the Marathas. So the Nizam who had fight with the Marathas lost most of his wealth, and therefore in order to seek protection he had to accept the subsidiary alliance policy. He was the first to accept this alliance. So Nizam of Hyderabad was the first to accept the policy. Tipu Sultan of Mysore refused to do so, but there was a brave king, that is Tipu Sultan. You must have heard the name, isn't it? Mysore, but he refused. At first he refused, he did not accept it. He did not want to get into this. But after the British victory in the 4th Anglo-Mysore War, Mysore was forced to become a subsidiary state. So the word is a subsidiary state. Subsidiary means under the rule of the British. That is called a subsidiary alliance policy, in which the British people indirectly gained control over your state. Maratha chief fought amongst themselves after the death of Nana Fadnavis. So Nana Fadnavis was the chief of the Maratha rulers, and after his death the small Maratha kingdoms or the small rulers, they fought amongst themselves in order to acquire, to gain power. Who would be the next chief? So One by one, all the Maratha states became the victim of the divide and rule policy. So you see the bold words, divide and rule. You must keep this in your mind, children. Divide and rule. This tactic was played, or this tactic was utilized by the British to make division amongst the Indian rulers. They created hatred in the minds of the rulers, although they were having a conflict, isn't it? Neighboring countries had a conflict with each other. But the British took most advantage of this by introducing such a policy, that is divide and rule policy. The other states, namely Ayodhya, Gorakhpur, Tanjore, Karnataka and Farrukhabad, also suffered the same fate. Okay, so they also had the same problem. In this way, within a span of 7 years, Wellesley expanded the company rule, that is the East India Company rule, who had just come to trade and no other purpose, now acquired political control. They increased their wealth like anything, a lot of economic prosperity at the cost of Indian rulers, and made the British the supreme power in India. And that is how, out of the other European powers who came to India, the French, the Portuguese, the Dutch, British emerged to be the most supreme power. Wellesley was the key person who brought about this change. Just like we learnt that Robert Clive, with his clever-mindedness, sharp-mindedness, wittiness, he knew that he will not be able to defeat, or they will not be able to defeat Siraj-ud-Dawla in the war, in the Battle of Plassey. So he used the tactic, the tricks, by bringing Mir Jafar onto his own side, that is the chief commander of Siraj-ud-Dawla's army. Same way, Wellesley also used his diplomatic tactics and introduced this policy, and gradually he brought the Indian state into its control and expanded the British power in India. And that is how the Britishers became the supreme power in our country. Well, let us note down the homework for today. Today's homework, you will be writing the short note given to you on page number 40 about the subsidiary alliance policy, about which we learned today in this lecture. So note down the homework, write a note on the subsidiary alliance system. So write the homework about the subsidiary alliance and submit it as a PDF after the lecture. So I hope all that I tried to teach you about Wellesley, the expansion of the British Empire and the subsidiary alliance policy is well understood by you. See you soon in the upcoming lecture. Till then, take care, have a nice day and goodbye.